Welcome back to the Den. Porter here, and today we are going to be diving into some real draft results. This is my home league's 2025 rookie draft that we completed a few weeks ago. We did this right after the NFL draft, and I want to talk through some of the team strategy, just do some different analysis about some of the guys in this rookie class. We have a lot of names to talk about, and ultimately just take a look at how people did and help you prepare for some variance in your leagues. It's always fun doing mock drafts and, taking a look at where we think guys will go based on ADP. But the best part about your home leagues is there is always going to be something that happens that is unexpected. So how can you take advantage of that in your rookie draft? And before we dive in, my big thoughts on rookie drafts in general is that your rookie picks have the most value when you are on the clock. So the draft is always fun, and you'll see in our draft, in our league, there aren't a ton of trades that happen on draft day. And I don't know if that's just because everyone wants to pick. They're so excited about that. Or, people aren't really getting what they think their picks are worth when they are on the clock. But so there's always a lot of strategy that leads up to the draft, and those few weeks leading to draft day are quite a lot of fun as picks get moved and pretty good players get moved for those picks. But really, my big piece of advice as you prepare for your rookie draft is that you need to draft for value. Do not draft for your team need. You want to take the best player available. Doesn't matter how your roster is constructed. You want to gain value on your roster year over year. And we'll go through my rookie tiers later this week as well. But if you have players in a similar tier, that's when you can sort of draft based on need, right? So if you have three players in a tier, a running back, a quarterback, a tight end, and you really need a quarterback, you of course should take that quarterback. But what we're talking about is you don't want to really reach on a position of need and pass on some really good value. So I was kind of in a predicament with that at one point in this draft. So I'll definitely make sure to reemphasize that point. But otherwise, let's dive right in. And, this is a good balance. You have a lot of pretty hardcore dynasty players in this league who really know what they're doing. And then we have certainly a few tacos that spice things up a little bit, but everyone pays their dues. This is a real money league. And just, I would expect that most home leagues are going to have some variance unless you're playing with all experts. You're probably going to have some similar situations here. And it'll be fun to look back at this too, since I said, this was right after the NFL draft. So almost 2 months removed. So some things may have changed here with our ADP. Alrighty. So our first pick, Ashton Jeanty, 101. The consensus 101. Can't speak too much about Jeanty. I feel like everything's been said about him in this class. I do think he's the clear 101 in most cases. So, yeah, easy pick there. I think he's a great player, good situation. As we've seen on some of our redraft mocks that we've done, he is going as a round 1 redraft pick. He's going as a round 1 startup pick in Dynasty as well. So this is a guy where not only is he worthy of the 101 here, he's someone that is expected by the market to contribute very heavily early on in his career. I do like the situation in Vegas. I think they're in a really fun direction. This is now a Pete Carroll system. They're going to want to run the ball. They have a pretty solid offensive line, and Geno gives them, a competent threat in the passing game with Bowers, Jacoby Myers, as well as Jack Besh, who, we'll talk about later. So I think the Raiders are turning into a fun offense. So there actually is potential for Jeanty to have a high touchdown volume. I think, this situation could be a lot worse. But so good offensive line, ascending offense, should have opportunities in the red zone. And, got Chip Kelly coming in as offensive coordinator, who's responsible for the back usage at Ohio State this past season. And yeah, I just really think that He's going to be a really fun real life player and a great fantasy player for years to come. I am a bit shocked where he is in the marketplace. In the mock drafts that I've done for dynasty startups, he's going ahead in some cases of like Jahmyr Gibbs, for example. I would still take both Bijan and Gibbs over Genti, really just for the known commodity. But if Genti can really become that, and I think a lot of people are counting on that, it's just some really fun juice added to the running back landscape here in Dynasty. And speaking of running backs, very much a theme of this draft class. Omarion Hampton is our 102 in this league. And I'm actually a bit lower on Omarion Hampton, although I do respect the draft capital and I love the situation in a John Harbaugh offense. To me, he's just more in a group with those round 2 guys in just my own pre-draft evaluations. I didn't see enough difference to really escalate him to the first round versus some of the guys who were in round 2. But, I'm certainly not an NFL scout. The Chargers know what they're getting in Omarion Hampton. I mean, he's a very good running back, tough, physical, incredibly athletic, very productive at UNC. Just another absolute workhorse in a system that's going to want to run the ball. So, yeah, headed into this draft, I think the general consensus was certainly that this was the year for running backs. I think if we, rewound a year a little bit and looked at 2024, we all knew that was like the receiver and quarterback year. And then we knew coming up was the running back year. So if you kind of think in that 2-window scope, you really could have built a pretty good strategy around how to build your teams. Like maybe acquire some veteran running backs last year, knowing you could get youth at the running back position this year. Whereas you had, better wide receiver talent last year, but it's kind of really changed. I think heading into this draft, I was a lot higher on some of the receivers and just other options, which made this a pretty fun, balanced, deep class, which I certainly didn't expect this time last year. So Omarion Hampton's 102. And then Travis Hunter here is our 103. And I'll definitely deliberate a little bit more on this when I go through my rookie rankings, but this is where I do have some discrepancy. For me personally, Travis Hunter is my 102, and I actually have him in the same tier as Genti. I just think we're overthinking a lot of things with Travis Hunter, and we know he's a generational player just based on, the way he plays both positions. But I think as a receiver, he's somewhat unpolished coming out of college just because he hasn't focused at all on that position, right? He's splitting time 50-50. So if he can lean in more to the receiver position, I think the upside there is through the moon. And I would lean the receiver in this case. So I think getting Travis Hunter, even like 103 still early, but to me, this is still a bit of a value just because to me personally, I just think there's I know the word generational gets mocked a little bit, but I think we look back at this whole saga of his position and just say, oh, well, we should have just known he would be good. Even, yeah. And this offense, Liam Cohen, he's going to be like a Chris Godwin plus. He's a more athletic player. And I think that's the role he's probably going to have in this offense. Obviously it's apples to oranges, but Brian Thomas can be more of the field stretcher, big body touchdown guy, like the Mike Evans role, which would open things up for Travis Hunter as more of like a do it all 3 layers of the field. So to me, there's so much untapped potential with Travis Hunter that I'm just not scared to take him earlier than 103. But so to me, that's a great pick. And really the first value in this draft. And, what's different too is that, to give credit where it's due, when we did our rookie draft, there were certainly still questions around what Travis Hunter's usage would be. I love that he went to Jacksonville. As soon as that happened on draft day, he was solidified as my 102, especially, with all the cherry on top was just the comments that have been made about him since, where as soon as he was drafted, James Gladstone pretty much came out and said, yep, he's going to focus primarily on offense. And, more recently this week, the Jaguars, Travis Hunter officially signed his rookie contract. So they post that we've signed wide receiver Travis Hunter, and then they posted the same exact thing again. We drafted cornerback Travis Hunter. So the team clearly views him as a full-time 2-way player. So I just have no concerns about his usage. And yeah, that's probably enough on Travis Hunter there. And at our 104, Tet McMillan, another guy that is interesting. His slide in mock drafts, obviously he's a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. There was a time where everyone really thought Matthew Golden was going to be wide receiver number 1. Teams are low on Tet McMillan. There was a video that came out about Tet McMillan from years ago where he's saying he doesn't watch football. Then there was an overreaction to that. You know, there's so many fun narratives that really come out around the NFL draft, but lo and behold, he's still a top 10 pick. He goes to the Panthers. And I really do love the fit for Tet McMillan. I think he's exactly what Bryce Young needs. I'm a huge Jalen Coker guy, but they do need a true alpha in that system. And again, just all these Tampa guys with these head coaching opportunities, Canales and someone else who really used a big body receiver, and Mike Evans very successfully. Again, not comparing Tet McMillan to Mike Evans right out the gate here, but he can be that big body winner that Bryce Young needs. He has such a big catch radius. Bryce Young's a very accurate quarterback. So I think the two of them are just really going to make a lot of good things happen on the field. Bryce Young can use his accuracy and, you know, have a bit more room for error with a guy with a radius like Tet McMillan. So just again, in these rookie drafts, this first round, you're getting good players. It's always fun in hindsight seeing who actually hits and who doesn't. Tet McMillan, for the downside case, just since we talked a little bit about the upside, he is that really tricky profile of player. I think he's a better prospect than Keon Coleman, for example. But this is where my weakness is I struggle in evaluating the big physical receivers with low separation numbers, because you can win different ways in the NFL, and you very much can win with physicality and size. It's just harder to do in the NFL than it is in college because of the level of competition increasing. So where I do think Tet McMillan could still have that very high ceiling, there is a world where his skill set just doesn't translate if he can't really separate and he's having a harder time against man coverage in the NFL. But I don't expect that to happen. I think I see enough athleticism from him that I think it'll translate. But that is just, one thing to worry about. When that profile hits, you get Nico Collins, and when it doesn't, you get Quentin Johnston. So it can be hard to predict with those guys, but Panthers believe in him. He's tied to a good quarterback. He's in a situation where he's going to have opportunities. I think he's the clear alpha in that room right out the gate. Although maybe Adam Thielen gives him a run for his money. But no, in all seriousness, I think Tet goes in and dominates and hopefully just elevates that offense. They're a fun team and really could make some noise this year after one possession games against the Eagles and the Chiefs last year. And after Tet, Cam Ward, the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft, the new quarterback for the Tennessee Titans, he goes at 105. And a lot of the mocks that I watched around draft season, it seemed like this really was the range for him. I didn't see Cam Ward go much earlier than this. And so I think it is a testament to the top end talent that we have in this draft class that the number 1 pick overall in a super flex league, who, happens to be a quarterback, falls to 5. So it's interesting because I want to call that a value, but that's where he's going. But just to be able to get the best quarterback on the board with the 5th pick, I think, that's just a pretty easy selection if I were in that position. And with Cam Ward, there is obviously always a huge range of outcomes with rookie quarterbacks. I think the situation is slightly better than it may be getting credit for. I think, the hardest thing to watch is rookie quarterbacks who have no time to throw and are just getting obliterated behind bad offensive lines. We saw that last year with Caleb Williams, although some of that, he certainly contributed to. We saw that with Justin Fields. kind of saw that with Drake May, although he certainly made the most of the situation. So Cam Ward's going into a situation with a good offensive line. And yeah, they earned the number 1 pick. They were the worst team in the NFL draft. This wasn't like a trade situation where they lucked out and got the number 1 pick. But I'm just at least confident in knowing that Cam Ward has an offensive line that he should be able to perform behind. I wish they did more on the offensive side of the ball in the draft with some weapons early on. I was surprised when they traded down in round 2 when they could have had like a Luther Burden. But Calvin Ridley, Tyler Lockett, a college teammate, Xavier Restrepo, there might be enough in that room for Cam Ward to make the most of. And this also kind of talking about value back to the point at the very beginning of the video. If you don't like Cam Ward, you just need him to be decent and you can flip him probably for like the 105 next year, right? Like if he just has any sort of bump in value as a quarterback and he looks like he's going to play for a long time, but you personally aren't convinced in what you see on the field, you still have such a good asset in a quarterback who was the number 1 pick overall. He'll have enough opportunities and chances in the NFL and enough, insulation with that rookie contract where you're feeling good about having him. So there's just to me, there's not really downside to taking him because if he hits, if he becomes a very good quarterback, he was probably worth much more than the 105. And if he's decent, he's probably worth the 105. And if he's bad, his name and his draft capital alone give you a window to trade him. So I think it's just a safe asset to have. And then here's where it got very interesting. This is the classic home league twist in everything. Pick number 6, Jackson Dart. And texting this owner as this was all happening. I was doing some research, figuring out who his guys were, and said specifically, like he told me, I just went with the position that I needed. Now, I would actually debate that this team, we don't need to get into the roster construction here, but this team, I don't think it needs a quarterback. I don't think that's as big of an area of need as they may have thought. But if Jackson Dart's your guy, that's great. Trade down. You don't need to take him at 106. I think his ADP at this point was maybe like 112, 201 range. So to make that big of a reach relatively on a player is just an interesting strat. It's also funny because I'm the next pick here. So I'm pick 7 in this rookie draft, which I traded for, but I was trying to trade up for 106 and I couldn't get the deal done. So when the Dart pick came in, I was really just thrilled that, I didn't have to give up anything to move up a spot and still get who I wanted. But let's talk a little bit about Jackson Dart. He was not my QB2. I was definitely in the Shador Sanders camp of just the pre-draft evaluations. Dart certainly grew on me as the clear QB3, which I think is a pretty popular opinion. I don't really know what to make of him. I'm kind of out. I don't really believe in the talent very much or the situation. He has Malik Neighbors to throw to. He has Brian Dable, who I do think is a good coach. So can they maximize his talent? They probably can. To me, he wasn't a round 1 talent. They took him late round 1, but just the track record of quarterbacks that are in that range from a draft capital standpoint, they just have a lot of hurdles to be successful. Kenny Pickett is like a very recent guy who was in this range. Will Levis was the first pick of the second round. So this late round 1, early round 2 quarterback range just isn't pretty. But there is a bit of a wrinkle to that is guys that are taken late round 1 who get to sit and develop, the chances do escalate dramatically. So all the Packers are basically like Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love, both late round 1 picks. So, the track record is sit and develop. And, if you're just drafted late, you have that round 1 talent, but you still need some polish. So if you're not thrown into the fire right away, I think you certainly have a better chance for success. So maybe that's what will happen with Dart. There is a competent enough QB room. Like we still have Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston there. So Dart could, in theory, sit his whole rookie season. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Dable and Joe Shane are kind of maybe playing and GMing, coaching and GMing for their jobs this season. Although, Mara's been very patient with them. So I don't know if with 1 year of a rookie that he'd be out on them. So they could also return. So there's a lot of scenarios here. It's just more so for me, it's the draft capital. And I hate when I'm solely relying on like one data point to evaluate somebody. But I'm not fully convinced. I definitely like the dart throw more in the late first or early second. But certainly this high is like you're counting on Jackson Dart to be a very good quarterback or at least be a QB2 for years. I'd rather trade that 10 in this situation. If I knew I was going to take Jackson Dart, I'd rather trade the 106 for my guys, Dak Prescott or Jared Goff, right? Or Brock Purdy, right? Go get me someone who I know I can get QB1 value out of. And then the upside case with Dart, he does run. So he certainly has some mobility, so I could see why, you may be high on him in fantasy. And I definitely wish him success in the league. Just from what I saw on his tape, I don't know. I don't see it long term, and it's unfortunate that he's going into an organization that's having a ton of quarterback problems, or at least since Eli Manning hasn't found a solution, and I don't think that Dart is it. So yeah, and again, if you are convicted on a guy like that, trade down. Go get your guy at the better value. I'm sure teams would have loved to trade up to get, running backs specifically. And then pick 107, I took Trevion Henderson. This was a little bit of an interesting scenario. Once I realized I couldn't move up to 6, it was a little bit stressful. Because I do like Judkins as well. So Judkins goes 108. So these Ohio State guys go back to back. And it's just hard to pick between them. I don't know. It's just two very different players. I know that they compared themselves in college to Monty and Gibbs. It kind of is that. Maybe not as high end. But yeah, you have Judkins, who's the bruiser. You have Trevion, who is I think he can be a 3-down back, but certainly a 3rd-down running back, good pass protection, catches the ball, a little bit more electric, but probably won't have the volume. And Judkins showed at the combine just that he is an absolute freak athlete and isn't just this like slow early work guy that does all the dirty work like he did in his last year in college at Ohio State, because he showed a bit more, I think, earlier in his college career. So yeah, it was a tough decision to make. Ultimately, I leaned Henderson of just PPR league. I'll take the catches. And Judkins is someone who I think, at least early on, will be pretty dependent on touchdown volume. Just that's how he profiles a bit more. And needing touchdown volume and going to the Cleveland Browns doesn't necessarily correlate. I'm just very concerned about that offense now and long term. There's just really there's not really any hope there. We'll see what happens with this quarterback battle. Like I said earlier, Shedeur was my QB2, so he certainly has, in my opinion, at least enough talent to be somewhat competent. I mean, Flacco, I guess, is competent. Maybe they have something in Dylan Gabriel. I just don't see this offense really moving the chains a whole lot to the point where you can have a guy like Judkins, get double-digit touchdowns off of, his red zone usage. So I'm very concerned about that. And that was really just what edged it to me. But I have them in the same tier. I love both players. Judkins actually gets the better draft capital. Henderson gets probably the better situation Really, really do like what the Patriots have done with their roster construction. If I were in multiple leagues where I had this choice, I'd probably try to split it pretty 50-50. Because situations do change fast in the NFL, and I'm not going to undersell that. Something could happen, and Cleveland's really good, and now Judkins is an every year double touchdown guy. So, and I do think he can catch the ball too. He just wasn't used that way at Ohio State. So both those guys really, I think their NFL stock benefited because they had less wear on the tires by splitting work their final year, but it also made it a little bit harder to evaluate how the two of them would translate to being 3-down backs in the NFL. So on Trevion's side, the Patriots have come out and said they view him as a 3-down back. They paid Ramondre, which I really do. I think running back contracts matter quite a bit, and I will use that several times. That's my huge argument for why I love Jordan Mason is contract and what they gave up for him in Minnesota. But Ramondre just had such a fumbling issue, and it's so hard to fix that. Maybe Vrabel can do it. We'll see. I think they certainly split work early on, but Trevion could certainly take over the backfield, whereas Judkins probably does have the easier path early on to volume at least. But the pass protection skills of Henderson should also get him on the field early, and they may not want to take him off the field just because of how much of an asset he is in that regard, and they don't want to take any chances with Drake May taking unnecessary hits. So flip a coin with these two guys. But the fact that you're getting these early round 2 running backs with a very high hit rate at 7 and 8, again, just shows the quality of this draft class. It's a good spot for running backs to be. And running backs continue to go off our board. At 109, Caleb Johnson went. Huge fan of his. I was safe for myself a bit. I was aggressively trying to get 109 to take Caleb Johnson, and I was offering way more than I should have. And luckily, I was not able to get a deal done. So sometimes in your home leagues, people will save you from yourself, and that is a very good thing. But yeah, Caleb Johnson, someone I wish I had on my team. I was really high on him pre-draft. Just love his running style. He's a great outside zone runner. And of the running backs that we've talked about so far, Caleb Johnson certainly was the most landing spot dependent prospect, just because the type of offense they ran at Iowa, again, it was just very, very heavy on outside zone. And had he gone to a different scheme, we just wouldn't have had as much information. Not that he couldn't be successful in more of a gap scheme. We just wouldn't have all the data to back that up, and it makes him a trickier evaluation. But he goes to the best possible spot in Pittsburgh in an Arthur Smith offense, where at the time too, they didn't have Aaron Rodgers, so you could really see the offense going through Caleb Johnson, which is exactly what happened in college. He was the only good player on his team. Teams knew that you had to stop Caleb to beat Iowa, and he still just put up ridiculous numbers despite everyone knowing that the ball was going to him. So that's what makes me like him, is seeing that he could carry a big workload at the collegiate level despite not having the best pieces around him. And everything Mike Tomlin has said since the draft has also really supported Caleb Johnson having success, where he pretty much just said, we'd watch him on Saturdays and we saw a lot of Sunday runs. It was a very easy projection and a very fun evaluation, or something along those lines was his draft day quote. So yeah, Caleb, just very physical runner. Another just clear 3-down guy. I think can catch the ball more than he got to showcase in college. He's very young as well, 21 years old. So Caleb just almost like Judkins in a way, but Judkins just has definitely a very big draft capital edge, with Caleb Johnson going in the late 3rd round. But it was the Steelers' 2nd pick, so you could talk yourself into it that way. Where so the hit rate's a little bit worse for 3rd round guy, but still solid hit rate in fantasy football for these really just day 2 running backs you certainly want to target. And with the addition of Aaron Rodgers, I did a whole deep dive on Aaron Rodgers, and the big takeaway from that video, which you should still go watch, is that he probably does have 1 year left of competent play. We've seen quarterbacks do it through, his playing his age 41 season, and not many, but we've seen it done. And then really there's no one but Brady at age 42. So depending how you feel about Rodgers, he's certainly an upgrade, in my opinion, over Rudolph and over Will Howard. So I think he at least makes them competent. And there really aren't a lot of offensive pieces. It's just DK Metcalf, someone that I'm not super high on in general. And they got rid of George Pickens. So it's really Rodgers and DK and Caleb. So I think he is going to have to carry a pretty big workload early on. I certainly think he'll split time with Jaylen Warren. But if they're going to be running the ball as much as they should in this Arthur Smith offense, there's plenty of work for those two guys to coexist. And Rodgers at least gives a much better projection where they should at least score in games, which may not have been on the table before. So there's a little bit of touchdown upside with Caleb Johnson. But long term, I just love the player. Again, he's young. He's with a coach who loves to run the ball, and he's in the perfect scheme fit. So for me, Caleb's certainly the right pick here. And then another running back goes RJ Harvey, one of the, maybe not the biggest shocker, because I think the community was pretty high on RJ Harvey just in general, a very popular sleeper. But then he goes round 2 to the Denver Broncos during the NFL draft. Everyone was excited, wondering who Sean Payton would take. Who would this new workhorse be in a productive Sean Payton offense? And it's, in fact, 24-year-old RJ Harvey. Where bringing up his age, certainly don't want to overreact, because if you're a win now team, which if you're drafting here at the 110, this is the perfect pick. And that lines up in this league as well. The team here at 110 is very good. So for them to just get what I expect to be a pretty productive running back is phenomenal for this team build. So RJ Harvey really is this perfect pick. I know a lot of people are leaning him over Caleb, particularly because of the draft capital and the situation. Broncos probably have the best offensive line in the league. And there's just better opportunity for touches there for Harvey. I still just am in the camp where I am Caleb over Harvey. And yeah, the age does have a factor to it. I don't think we should be saying, RJ Harvey's washed and old because of his age. But I still would just lean Caleb, all things considered. But yeah, no, I'm very high on RJ Harvey in redraft, particularly. Like, probably might take him above Judkins as well. Actually, yeah, you could even probably argue to take him over Henderson in redraft. He just should have a clear workload early on, and we'll see what happens. I know they just signed J.K. Dobbins as well, so I probably wouldn't put too much fear into me, but Dobbins was effective and efficient last season in Los Angeles, so he still has some juice left. So it's not as clear cut as it was at the time of this draft, where RJ Harvey really was, oh wow, he's the 3-down back for the Sean Payton offense. And now there probably will have a bit more of a committee, but if that gets you any discount on RJ Harvey in Dynasty or redraft, capitalize. He's the guy that you want in this backfield. And then Emeka Egbuka is our pick at 111. So yeah, I just really like the Emeka Egbuka profile. This is kind of the guy I target. I mentioned earlier, sometimes I get scared of the more physical guys. I love the nuanced route runners, guys who can just get open and become that security blanket, particularly in like PPR formats where, you have these PPR scammers. But Emeka Egbuka is more than that. He's actually a very good player. This was one of the biggest surprises to me on draft day, partially because I have Jalen McMillan. So I was, not in, a little bit in my feels watching this pick happen. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Just with Godwin's health, Mike Evans' age, McMillan's fun, but he's certainly not a number one guy. I think he certainly could be a number 2. as opposed to number 4. But yeah, Igbokwe just gives the Bucs another really good receiver. So Baker Mayfield, huge draft day winner, and just curb your expectations a little bit with Igbokwe year 1. I think he's the classic, like, this is a JSN season for Igbokwe. He's behind 2 established guys, and he'll have games where he flashes, whether that's due to the older guys ahead of him. Mike Evans has been having hamstring issues, so maybe he could miss time. Godwin, we don't know what the recovery looks like from the ankle. So there will be flashes, I think, that Igbokwe has early on. However, if all 3 on the field, it will be tough for him to really, I think, be an elite fantasy option, but certainly someone that still has that flex appeal, possibly on a week-to-week basis. And then in year 2 and year 3, you'll see that productivity jump. So the fact that you're getting a first-round receiver on an offense that loves to throw the ball, or I guess we don't really know what the offense will look like, but just through the past couple coordinators, this is a passing offense. Baker can get it done. Baker can support multiple fantasy guys, as we have seen now under 2 different coordinators in Tampa. So why not let this continue and have Igbokwe be a good target for him? And in this draft specifically, the team that took him is the perfect fit. This is a team that really can't compete now. They don't have a lot of young options, so they're really going to want a high draft pick next year as well. They're pretty much going to want to play for the 101. So to get a guy like Igbokwe where he's going to be better in year 2, year 3 than year 1 is just like the ultimate help for him, where he's not going to put him out of, he's not going to be so good that he can't get the 101 next year, but certainly still productive enough year 2, year 3 where it's a big asset for this team. At R112, one of the big 2 tight ends goes off the board here in Tyler Warren, who's drafted by the Colts at pick 14 overall, I believe. Just a tremendous hit rate on tight ends drafted in early round 1. The situation there is a little bit interesting. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't really know who the quarterback's going to be. We can assume it's Anthony Richardson, but now there's camp buzz about Daniel Jones, which probably wouldn't really be good for anybody on that team either. But the Colts have been desperate for a tight end threat. They've been targeting them in drafts. They've been pretty open about that. And they finally get their guy in Tyler Warren here at 14. And he can really do it all. He was a lot of fun to watch at Penn State. He was a great receiving option, but they used him as a running back, and he even had some passing touchdowns as well. So Warren can be used all over the place. Just one of those guys that gets the stereotypical like football player label, but that's really, NFL guys say that that's the best compliment they can get, that you can use them however you want. So don't necessarily love the immediate situation for Warren, but tight end typically is a position that needs time to develop anyway. We've just been so spoiled the last 2 years with Brock Bowers being the tight end 1 in fantasy as a rookie, and then Sam Laporta being the tight end 1 in fantasy as a rookie the year prior. And that pretty much hasn't happened in history other than recently. So you can't really expect that with Warren or Loveland, who we'll talk about here in a sec. But if you're willing to be patient and let these guys develop, he certainly has the talent. If I'm choosing between tight ends, if I'm on the clock, and to me that's best available, and I'm between Warren and Loveland, I am going Loveland. Age is on Loveland's side. Draft capital is on Loveland's side. I think, maybe a little bit situation is up for debate, at least right after Loveland was drafted. With Loveland being in Chicago, there was a feeling that there was a lot of target competition there with DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. And then, of course, later in the draft, they had Luther Burden as well. But, as is a trend on this channel, situation changes so fast in the NFL, where to me, I'll take the guy in the Ben Johnson offense. He could easily be this team, Sam Laporta, at least like looking at what Sam Laporta did last year in year 2, where other guys took up more of the work, but Laporta still had some reliability. And Loveland just has the better profile to me as a fantasy option, where he is much more of the receiver in a tight end's body than Warren is, who is the more physical player. But Loveland can certainly block well enough to stay on the field, which is what you're hoping for. You want your fantasy tight ends to be good enough blockers that the team has to put them on the field for all situations, but you don't want them to be too good of a blocker where they're not used in the passing game. So Loveland, to me, just fits that mold. And again, younger, has the better draft capital. And to me, I really just loved his tape, and I think he's a better blocker than he gets credit for. Great route runner. And I'm also just low on some of the Bears guys. I don't want to become the world's biggest DJ Moore hater, but yeah, to me, that's just a player I'm not really in on long term. I think he could be gone mid-season or after this year as well. Just some of the Ben Johnson dialogue that's come up this offseason seems pretty targeted at DJ Moore. Of he wasn't happy with the tape he watched, seeing veterans give up on plays, and I think we all know who he's talking about. So there's certainly a world where Loveland, like there's still a path for Loveland to be the number one target earner in this offense. If DJ Moore is gone and Rome Odunze doesn't make the leap that we want him to make, and Luther Burden isn't on the field, like he's not practicing right now, dealing with soft tissue injury, like I don't see why, like Loveland's path to being the number 4 target, I feel like he's being assumed that that's what's going to happen. But his path, to me at least, to being the number 1 target it's like they're equal. I don't think there's really a higher percentage that he's the number 4 option than he is the number 1. So yes, it's, you always want to look for downside, but you also want to look for upside and vice versa. You want to always think about the upside of these guys, but always, at least in your head, know like what you think the downside is. So to me, he could really go either way. He'll probably just end up being the number 3 or best case scenario number 2 option on the team, which is what you want to see from your fantasy tight end. And so just keep in mind that, yeah, these guys, don't expect them to be Brock Bowers. Give them time to develop. But if you get really good production right away, just consider that a bonus, especially for where you're getting them here, late round 1 or early round 2. So, okay, 201. So our first round's over. Tyler Warren was the last pick. 201 was Matthew Golden. And again, like you're getting a round 1 receiver going into a situation where he should be the clear alpha, and you're getting him at 201. So you can't really nitpick that. I like Jordan Love. Jordan Love's a good quarterback, so he's tied to a good, stable situation. That room, they have a lot of receivers. They don't really have anyone who's emerged as the go-to guy. And I don't actually know if that's what they need Matthew Golden to be. Maybe that's what the team wants. He could just be a really strong addition to an already crowded room. But I do think he's better than the guys they have on their roster. And sometimes I need to look across the industry to trust evaluations from people who know more than I do about football. And Matthew Golden is Steve Smith's number 1 receiver. And Steve Smith, obviously a very great player in the NFL, but also has a very good track record with his wide receiver evaluations. So for him to be so high on him, he spoke a lot about his just demeanor and character that's really going to help him stand out in that locker room and get touches early on. So I think Matthew Golden's a very fine selection here at the 201. And then the 202, Colston Loveland did go, and I just spoke at great length about him. So I think 202 is a steal, especially with Warren going at 112. I think we could see Loveland going as high as the 110 in a lot of leagues. And if it's tight end premium, you're probably seeing him higher, which I should have specified. This is not a tight end premium league. And to be honest, the team that got Loveland here, another pretty savvy draft day move, they traded down. So they had the 108. So they were in position to get Quinshon Judkins, would have been the best player available. Their team build, they're another one that they're still a draft or 2 away from really being able to have a competent roster. So taking a running back for them really might not have made the most sense. So I would have leaned, another position, although my tiers certainly would have gone running back. But they traded down and got some good draft capital. Also added Terry McLaurin to their roster. So, they kind of got a high-end wide receiver too. and moved down a few spots and still got good value with Colston Loveland. So I think that was a fairly savvy move on their part there. And of course, yeah, the context always matters with where these picks go, because not everyone in my league's listening to this or listening to my advice and choosing to draft based on value. So teams will draft on need. It's just certainly the nature of how these drafts go. And then Jaden Higgins here at the 203. Jaden Higgins was definitely a late riser for me. I really did just fall in love a little bit with the profile heading into the draft, even though he's that big bodied receiver that I, contradicted myself a little bit, said that I don't love that type of profile, which is why ultimately I'm a bit more out on him now. But I see the appeal with his athleticism. And watching his tape's interesting because he really popped at the NFL Combine. I didn't see as much of that athleticism on his actual tape. I mean, the only game I watched of his fully was against North Dakota State in week 1. And watching that game, to me, Jalen Knoll pops off the tape, truly stands out every play. And Higgins felt more in the background. So a bit surprising to see his athleticism scores be as good as they were after the combine. So I did fall for that a little bit, but the NFL did as well, taking him 34th overall, going to the Texans. They trade down for him. And as soon as Jaden Higgins was selected, not the two right after, but the Titans traded down and then the Raiders traded down. So I think those are two teams that you can kind of say they were probably targeting Jaden Higgins, just because as soon as he's off the board, they decided to go another direction, which I think is interesting. And he's going to be fun. He kind of is like Nico Collins. That is the perfect college comp for him. So for him to get to learn from Nico is going to be really interesting, and he's going to benefit a lot from not having to be the number one on that team. So very curious to see what happens with his career. For me personally, I do have this next player ahead of him, which at our 204 is Luther Burden, which I'm not feeling as good about now at this point in the offseason as I was on the rookie draft day. So for me, Luther Burden, I actually had a tier break after him. So for me, getting him here at 204, where I selected him in this draft, I was feeling really happy, felt like this was the base value. And now he's just not practicing. So it's hard you don't want to hold injury against a player. I don't get what some of the comments are. Like Ben Johnson's made some comments that feel very aggressive about don't know the exact quote, but I was watching the clip of him pretty much saying you can't get better if you're not on the field and you're missing really valuable time. But also if a player's injured, how much of that is them? So if Ben Johnson's making that comment, is everything true? And Luther Burden isn't fully committed, because that was his big knock, I think, coming into the league. He had an incredible sophomore season. This time last year, we were talking about him as a potential 101 in rookie drafts for this season. And, he's fallen quite a bit with a very underwhelming junior season. So before the NFL draft happened, my take on that was very much that it was just bad quarterback play. He's a tough play. He was taking a lot of hits, a lot of hospital balls, and he was getting up. He was showing no fear. And eventually kind of just stopped with that. And he did lose interest in an offense that didn't really seem to serve him. So I don't want to excuse, right? You can't, it's like my TJ Moore criticism. You can't give up on plays in the NFL and expect to have a long career. So I don't know. I'm still a believer in the talent of Luther Burden. I like the situation. I thought Ben Johnson would be the perfect coach for him because of this message of accountability and, holding the vets accountable when you're coming in as a rookie like Luther Burden, to see guys that are established in the league like a DJ Moore still be held to a very high standard. I think that sets the expectation pretty well. So Luther has a chip on his shoulder not going in round 1. The talent is absolutely there. And talking about upside scenario, he could be the go-to slot guy in a Ben Johnson offense. So I'm just hoping he figures it out and gets healthy and that we can see him on the field, because I think it'll be a much more fun NFL season if we see Luther Burden. And one more point I want to make about Jaden Higgins that I didn't get to is he is in the perfect sweet spot for draft capital. And that is what makes him a very enticing pick as well. And his character, like, he doesn't have those questions that Burden does. So in hindsight, Higgins with the better draft capital, better character reports, essentially. I can see the vision there. And he was picked 34 overall. Last year we saw, Lad McConkey go there. In that range, we've seen T. Higgins go there. I did take a look at just, I think it was like the last 10 years of draft data for who went as like a top 35 receiver. And the worst name on that list was Elijah Moore, who at his height in Dynasty, he absolutely went off to end his rookie season where there was a window to sell him. So with Jaden Higgins, he's in a good spot, good offense. CJ Stroud can support 2 receivers. Certainly we've seen him support 3. So yeah, you could be getting a gem there with Jaden Higgins. I was definitely burdened over Higgins by quite a lot right after the NFL draft, even certainly pre-draft and after NFL draft. But now with a little bit of what's unfolding, I see a bit more of the vision there with Jaden Higgins. And now here's where our running backs go. In Cam Scatterbo at the 205 and Bashal Tutin at the 206. And it was hard for me. So I had to stick to my own advice and say I really need to not overemphasize need, but my team certainly needs running back in this league. So I really was hoping I could get Cam or Tutin. But to me, it was just I had to respect my tiers. I had Luther Burden a tier ahead of these guys. Had to take him. When he fell, had Higgins fallen, I had Higgins in the same tier as Cam Scatterbo and Bashal Tutin. So, then I could have considered running back. But yeah, had to absolutely respect the process. That's helped me more times than not. I always regret when I don't follow the process at reach, and it just never works out. So I gotta stick to the rankings, and it's the original plan that I have going to these drafts. I'll have my phone out and write notes to myself to keep in mind during the draft, which don't panic and send trade offers to people when there's a player on the board you like. Stick to your tiers. So that's always fun as well to keep yourself in check a little bit. So yeah, I mean, for me, I think I am, well, at least at the time of the rookie draft, I was very much Tutin over Cam. Just because it's just an upside thing. I also do love Cam Scatterbo, and he can certainly catch the ball, and he'll probably be the 3-down back there. So I don't really have too many questions about him. Absolute electric college profile. I think he's the second most productive season outside of Christian McCaffrey. So he really is a do-it-all guy. And he fits in well with what the Giants want to do. So Tyrone Tracy, to me, is kind of a little bit irrelevant now. I loved what we saw from him as a pass catcher, but he really struggled in between the tackles, struggled in the red zone, and had some issues fumbling, where Cam Scatterbo is just not going to have those same issues. And he's a very good pass catcher. So there's not really a role for Tracy, who of course was the receiver converted to running back. So that's really what he's giving you. But Cam can do that. So you're potentially here getting a 3-down workhorse. He's a day 3 pick, but you have to take it with a grain of salt because the day 3 running back hit rates are not very good for fantasy. But he was picked early enough, as was Tutin, where I just don't feel that bad about it. Like I said at the very beginning, we know this is the running back class. There's a high standard to what these running backs are going to do. There's high expectations of what they're going to do. And it's possible that guys fell just because of the depth. There were some NFL teams that very much hinted at that you could just wait on your running backs. You knew there were so many in this draft class. So I don't know. I'm treating them because they're so early, day 3. You could loop them in to the day 2 guys, but realistically, you have to say what actually happened, and they did go day 3 of the NFL draft, so they're kind of a bad bet in that regard. But they're just 2 good players, and Tutin's very exciting. He has the explosive playmaking upside, so of course I think he's getting instant well, he's getting compared by the fantasy guys. We're all comparing him to Bucky Irving. Just Liam Cohen offense. Uh, even though Bucky Irving's not really like a fast player, just really good contact balance. With Tootin, it's like you can see the vision of being a home run threat. That running back room is certainly dicey. Who knows what's going on with ETN? And so there's very much this world where Tootin becomes the running back one on this team, and he could have like that Devon A-Chain type of upside where he's catching the ball and like is just a home run hitter every time the ball's in his hands. He'd have a lot of work to do to get there. Fumbling is one of those issues, like I was saying about earlier about when we're talking about Ramondre Stevenson a little bit. It seems to translate. Like guys who fumble a ton in college very rarely go into the NFL and just don't fumble the ball anymore. And the fact that instantly, like in one of the first practices, we instantly get a quote about, oh yeah, Tootin left the ball on the ground today, which you hate to see. Hopefully they can work on it and get rid of that quirk in his game. But he certainly has the more fun upside of the two. But, Cam really early on should have a pretty big path to work here. And you can just see the vision with him being an absolute hero for the New York Giants. You see that vision as well. And then after our running backs, where to me, these are like the last two, despite this being such a deep running back class. So you have Janty Hampton, the Ohio State guys, Caleb Johnson, RJ Harvey, and then Cam and Tootin were really like the last two that you probably feel really good about drafting from the running back position, which is disappointing that we didn't get better landing spots or draft capital for some of the other running backs. But yeah, really this is that sweet spot where if you have your tiers set up and you have these running backs in this tier, this is absolutely the right place to take them. And then we have a pair of receivers here that I really like both. At the 207, Trey Harris went, and then at the 208, Jack Besh went. So 2 round 2 picks in the NFL draft. Trey Harris, of course, goes to the Los Angeles Chargers, which this was one of my favorite real life fits of the NFL draft. This is exactly what the Chargers need. I think Ladd McConkey's still, going to dominate targets here. I don't think he's hurt very much by this, but Trey Harris is like the absolute vision upgrade of how they've been using Quentin Johnston. Trey Harris can catch the ball. First and foremost, that's important. And he's just a field stretcher. So he has that Ole Miss profile, which the other Ole Miss guys like, AJ Brown and TK Metcalf had, where he becomes a bit of a tough evaluation because so many of his routes are goes and hitches. You're not seeing him run a full route tree. So then the question, of course, comes up, can he run the full route tree, or is that just the system? And it could, of course, go either way. But we've seen that hit in the NFL from that college. And, of course, you don't want a helmet scout. But, we've at least, you can see the vision. And I don't know, Trey Harris to me also, like, the fun thing about him is how he used to be a quarterback, which I think matters just to his understanding of leverage and where he needs to be, which is, Justin Herbert's a very high IQ quarterback. And I think him and Ladd really connected on just being on the same page of knowing where the space is and having a good connection. I think Trey Harris can have that with Herbert as well. Just that quarterback mindset. He's always going to be trying to be quarterback friendly, which is just always good when a receiver is able to do that. So I really do like Trey Harris, and I think he could elevate this offense. And to me, he should certainly have the Quentin Johnston role early on. And then from there, anything can happen. And then Jack Besh, another player that I really like. Not the most productive college profile, but there are certainly some fun facts and stats about him that are in his favor. Primarily the fact that he was on an LSU team with Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors and led that team in receptions. But of course, those two became something much more than Besh did. But at TCU, he's just much more of a tape evaluation than college production, where it's easy to see how he plays. When asked about who he models his game after, one of the names he gave was Puka Nacua. And you can see why. Like he finds space. He's very physical. He's not like the best athlete, but you don't notice that when watching him just because of the power he plays with and his he truly has an elite understanding of space. It was a interesting fit. I was a bit surprised when he went to the Raiders just because they have Jacoby Myers, who is kind of I think Besh probably fits most as a power slot. And you already have Myers, who's a good slot receiver. And then you have Bowers, who is also kind of just a power slot, who happens to be a tight end, or he's at his best there. But Bowers also had a lot of success on the outside. So maybe there's a world where Bowers moves more outside and Besh plays on the inside. I don't know what's going to happen with those designations, because there is a world where Besh just becomes a tight end in the NFL. I don't know. There's some people who think he should reposition himself to have success. But to me, I don't know. He's not going to win with speed, but there, like we were talking about Ted McMillan, there's multiple ways to win in the NFL. So if you're getting a guy with a really good understanding of space, with good draft capital, so a really good story, just behind his brother and just the miracle ending at the Senior Bowl. It's just, he's so easy to root for, which does have value in dynasty leagues. Guys these are guys that you can also always flip and move. So, good pick 'em here. Kind of like I said with the Ohio State guys, with these ADPs, Trey Harris and Jack Besh to me I kind of would want 50-50. I think Trey Harris has risen a bit in ADP. There's people who have him in late round 1, early round 2. So here he went at 207, which is where he was in the sleeper ADP on draft day. All right, and then to end round 2, we have some quarterbacks as a tight end. So Mason Taylor was the 209, and then Jalen Milroe, the 210, Tyler Shuck, the 211, and Terrence Ferguson's our 212. Mason Taylor, I think, is a good player, a good all-around tight end, which unfortunately, he doesn't have that profile of translating to a very good fantasy player. I think he'll be a better NFL player than he will fantasy. But he certainly can catch. He's polished as well. He's certainly not going to need a lot of development there in New York. It's just, how much do you trust Justin Fields to feed Garrett Wilson and Mason Taylor? However, we saw Cole Kmet do pretty well with Justin Fields as the number 2 option. So that's certainly the upside with Taylor, is that he should be the clear number 2 option in New York. So he could instantly become like a Jake Ferguson level tight end early on. He has NFL bloodlines. He'll be prepared. He'll be mentally ready. So I do like that pick there. Again, you just always want to temper those expectations with tight ends about how they'll produce early, just because it doesn't happen that much. But, good as bet as any that Taylor can do it. And then Jalen Milroe and Tyler Shuck. This was before the Derek Carr retirement. In hindsight, Shuck probably should go much earlier than the 211. But Milroe, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid too, though, that he's the biggest upside pick of the entire rookie draft. If he hits, he's Jalen Hurts, right? That's the upside you're shooting for. So if you're in a situation where you just want to be the one to get that lottery ticket, go ahead and do it. Milroe's situation, his path to playing time isn't that bad. The Sam Darnold deal is pretty team friendly, where they have an out after this year. So if Darnold isn't performing well and Milroe's really turning heads with his athleticism, he'll get opportunities this year. I know that Milroe is a 3rd round pick, so the hit rate's basically 0. It might actually be 0 for a 3rd round quarterbacks, but it is so hard to watch his tape and just think that, just decide you don't want him on your roster. He's just that fun to watch. And he has rushing upside, which is what we all want out of our quarterbacks in fantasy. And he could be the starter next year. I don't know. This is what you got to talk yourself into with Jalen Milroe. And Tyler Shuck, I'm not in on him as a talent, pretty much for all the same reasons I talked about with Jackson Dart. However, he'll have opportunities to start. The fact that you're getting a starting quarterback at the 211 in a rookie draft is pretty insane, and it probably speaks volumes too, though, to what the market thinks about Tyler Shuck as a player. I think if you want to see him at his best, so I recently watched, did like a, I had to do some evaluation on the Texas Tech versus Oregon game where Tyler Shuck started 2 seasons ago before transferring. He can run. I was shocked. He ran all over the Oregon defense. So, yes, he's an older prospect. He's 25 years old. He's going to the Saints, which is just kind of gross. But he should be the guy. I am a Rattler truther. So for me to say that, I don't know. It's got to cope a little bit. But yeah, Kellen Moore came out and pretty much said Tyler Shuck's going to get as many opportunities as possible. So he could be good. I don't know. Early round 2 pick, hit rate's not great, but just the fact that you're getting someone, even if he's only starting for 1 season in the NFL, to get him here is fantastic value. And Terrence Ferguson would be my tight end of choice here in late round 2 over Mason Taylor. Just very athletic, and tight end, the athleticism seems to translate most for this position than any other position in the NFL. So he doesn't have the best college production profile, but has great athleticism, good draft capital, and a system. Sean McVay, someone who's been really wanting a tight end too. Tried to trade up and get Brock Bowers a year ago. Couldn't do it. Gets Terrence Ferguson this year. They trade back. They still get him, but they said, if we couldn't have traded back from 26, he still was our guy. So I think that just speaks volumes to, how the team feels about Ferguson. And he's another guy that probably should be going higher, but I don't know who who drops though, right? If you raise him at ADP, but yeah, I would probably take him ahead of Taylor, and honestly probably ahead of those quarterbacks as well. So great value there at 212. And then starting round 3, just like always, it's always exciting to get these round 3 guys, and they end up just being dart throws, and maybe 1 or 2 of these guys will hit. But Jalen Noel, to me, good case to be that guy. He's in a really good situation there in Houston. To me, he's better than Christian Kirk already. I'm not worried about that at all. I think Jalen Noel will be the slot guy in that offense. And, Stroud can support that role. We've seen that with Tank Dell. We saw that with Diggs as well for, the brief period of time he was healthy last season. So if you're getting the slot guy, more of like an outside slot, kind of like a more vertical Christian Kirk, if you're getting that out of Jalen Noel, he's going to be very good for fantasy. And I really do love the player. Like I said, he's one of the few guys in this class that at the receiver position who truly jumped off the tape. So I think, I don't know, I'm shocked he went in round 3 of the NFL draft. Jaden Blue goes here at our 302. Someone I'm definitely lower on now. I had a bit more rookie fever for him on draft day. I don't know what the Cowboys are really piecing together there at the running back position, but I do think Jaden Blue has enough upside. Like if he can just be, well, it's a tall task, but if he can be that kind of early career Tony Pollard where you're giving Dak a receiving option and a change of pace guy, I think you'd be really thrilled with that. And that's what you have to hope for. He's probably not going to be an every down back. I don't really think, I'm not high on Javonte Williams or Miles Sanders at this stage of either of their careers. So I think the excitement here is the path to touches with Blue. But at very least, he should be a good third down running back. Alec Iomanner was our 203 and Kyle Williams was, Alec Iomanner was our 303 and Kyle Williams was our 304. Kyle Williams, I'm so high on. He's my 209 in my rankings. And it is criminal that he fell this far in the draft, and it is more criminal that nobody would trade a late second or early third to me so I could get him. It's upsetting. Hate to see it. And it's tough. Definitely on my guy of this rookie class. Like I said, just love what the Patriots are building. And him and Noel, it's so funny because these are the round 3 guys. The 2 of them, truly, they're my 2 favorite highlights to watch from this class were Noel and Williams. So for both of them to go round 3 in the NFL draft is kind of funny. And for both of them to go round 3 here in rookie drafts is interesting as well. Alec Iomanner, I don't even know what to really say. I don't think like just the big physical profile that I've talked out on enough this episode. I'm kind of just out on him. I don't really see it. Even though there is path to targets there, I think Restrepo will be on the field more than Ion Banner will be. But yeah, Kyle Williams certainly could emerge as Drake May's number one guy, and you want that on your fantasy team. There's just enough opportunity there. You know, who knows if Diggs will be playing after all his boating excursions this offseason. But no, even if Diggs will play and he'll be fine and he'll be good for fantasy probably for this season. But I really do like what I'm seeing with Williams, and he's breaking out at camp as well. So, you know, just following those narratives, the speed certainly seems to be translating. Dylan Sampson went at the 305. I was so high on Dylan Sampson. This was one of those guys that I'm so sad he landed where he did. I really like Dallas taking Dylan Sampson would have been incredible. So for Dylan Sampson to just go where he's a clear backup hurts, because I do think he's a starter in the NFL. Really good short yardage guy. What's interesting about Sampson is he's almost viewed as like an electric third down pass catcher. And that's not really how he profiles to me. I see him much more of a between the tackles guy, despite his size. I think it was Hayden Winks from Underdog who tweeted a pretty insane stat about him on Twitter that like every single one of his carries, like on 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2, like went for a first down. So he's a really good in between the tackle runner, and he's just behind Judkins. And there were people who probably like Sampson more than Judkins pre-draft, but just with the way the draft capital fell, you can't really argue that now. And this team that took him here, they also have Judkins, so they get the pair of that backfield, which is a smart move. Shador Sanders here went at our 306. At this point, why not take a dart throw on the guy that everyone viewed higher than the NFL did? And that quarterback room still is kind of wide open. We haven't really seen anyone emerge. Shador's not helping himself with, going 101 miles per hour in his spare time here, which certainly isn't the leadership material that people want to see from him. But from a talent standpoint, that I still think that competition's wide open, and he'll probably play. I think all of the Cleveland guys will get starts this season at some point. Elijah Arroyo, 3.7. He had sneaky draft cap. We had top 50 NFL draft pick. Another really good athlete going to Seattle. Just someone that I think you would really have to be patient with. Don't really see a path to early production. Although I guess you could argue that Seattle doesn't have a ton of receiving options outside of Jackson Smith and Jigba right now. So if Arroyo does pop, he has early opportunity at the very least. And then Devin Neal and DJ Giddens are our next two picks at the 308 and 39. And just players that I think at this point you're taking guys that you were high on pre-draft. And Devin Neal's in a decent situation. It's just Kamara. And I don't know. I think Devin Neal's better than Kendre Miller. Devin Neal's like an all-you-can-do type guy. Almost, he reminds me a little bit of like Isaiah Pacheco in that sense of like if you put Devin Neal on the field, you'll be happy enough with his production, but you're not gonna rule out your options long-term as an NFL team if Devin Neal is your starter. And TJ Giddens was one of my favorite running back prospects. He goes to I think a decent situation. If I'm not mistaken, I think Jonathan Taylor has an out after this year, and DJ Giddens should get some playing time. I mean, Taylor misses time almost every year, so if Giddens gets a few spot starts, you're going to be really happy to have him on your team at this price. Harold Fannin went at the 310. There was a pretty big bidding war for him in this league. Just a very fun player. How can you not love Harold Fannin Jr.? And then some dart throws to end here. 311 is Will Howard. Again, at the time, Rodgers wasn't signed, so this was more of a, hey, Will Howard could be the starter in Pittsburgh type of situation, which, could still happen. And then 312, Jarquez Hunter to end the draft, which is who would have been my first waiver selection had he fallen. I really like Jarquez Hunter. Like, his draft capital is similar to Cam Scatterbo and Bashal Tutin. He's in a Sean McVay system. He provides something different than what those running backs have in Los Angeles. Blake Corum is basically a clone of Kyron Williams. Sean McVay has said that himself when they drafted Corum last year, of just, oh yeah, they're interchangeable. They can do all the same things. Hunter is the different one, right? So he's kind of like the black sheep of that group, where he's more of the speedster home run hitter. So I just, sometimes you have to trust organizations, and the Rams are obviously a very good organization. Sean McVay knows what he's doing. They find gems in the draft all the time. So I really like Jarquez Hunter, and certainly someone I'm targeting. Yeah, I think you could argue him over Neal and Giddens for sure, depending how you view those guys. So curious what you think of this draft. How do people do? What's the craziest pick? What's the best pick? What's the worst pick? Would love to engage with all of you, have some discussions. Also love to hear how your own rookie drafts go, and what some of your differences of opinion are. As a small content creator, it's just everything helps. So if you can like this, subscribe, download the podcast on, Apple or Spotify, really every sort of contribution to this community is very, very helpful in helping more people get exposed to the Den content. So I really appreciate you stopping by. Best of luck in your rookie drafts, and I'll see you next time.